Fletcher Knox paid $12 for a horse. That was the deal, nothing more. But when he woke at dawn, two women stood at the edge of his camp, silent as stone, watching him with eyes that held something between accusation and desperation. Fletcher had been exhausted, sleeping deeper than usual after 3 days of hard riding. The women moved like people used to traveling without being noticed. One held a small bundle of belongings. The other carried nothing at all behind them. The mare he'd bought the day before grazed peacefully as if their presence made perfect sense. Fletcher sat up slowly, hand moving toward the rifle beside his bedroll. The older woman noticed. She didn't flinch. She just tilted her head slightly, like she was measuring whether he'd actually use it. 3 days ago, Fletcher had been 70 miles south with empty pockets and a deadline that felt like a noose tightening. Winter was coming fast, and crossing the northern pass without a horse meant dying on a frozen trail. Nobody would find until spring thaw. The trading post had been his last chance. And when the tribal leader offered him the strongest mare in the territory for exactly $12, Fletcher thought luck had finally turned in his favor. He should have known better. Nothing that perfect ever came without a price, hidden somewhere in the fine print. Fletcher stood slowly, keeping his movements careful. The younger woman's eyes tracked him like a hawk watching a rabbit. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched until it felt like a third presence in the clearing. "Where did you come from?" Fletcher's voice came out rougher than he intended. The older woman glanced at her companion, then back at him. When she finally spoke, her accent was thick, but her words were deliberate. "Takikote sent us, part of arrangement." Fletcher felt ice slide down his spine. "What arrangement? I bought a horse, that's all." "Yes, horse." She gestured to the mare, "and us." The words hit him like a fist to the gut. His mind raced through the transaction, replaying every moment. The old man's strange urgency, the way he'd kept glancing toward the hills. The odd phrasing when he'd said the horse came with everything needed for the journey. "I didn't agree to this," Fletcher said, his voice harder now. "I don't know what your father thinks, but I'm not. He is not selling us." The older woman's tone cut through his protest like a blade. "You do not understand. Then explain it to me." She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes, fear maybe or calculation. "You leave at sunrise tomorrow. That was the plan. Then we go with you. 3 days. After that, we separate." She paused, her jaw tightening. "Or we all die here." Fletcher stared at her. The way she said it, flat, certain, sent a warning through every nerve in his body. This wasn't about commerce or cultural differences. This was about survival, and somehow, without knowing how or why, he'd been pulled into something far more dangerous than simple horse trade. "Who's coming?" Fletcher asked quietly. The younger woman finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who does not take no for answer." Fletcher looked between them, then toward the tree-line. Morning light filtered through the branches, peaceful and golden, but he could feel it now, the weight of unseen eyes, the sense that this clearing, this moment was the calm before something brutal crashed through. He thought about his $12, about the horse, about the fact that he was alone, miles from anywhere with two women who'd been sent to him like a desperate gamble. He could refuse, send them back, keep to his own plan. But the look in the older woman's eyes told him everything he needed to know. If he did that, he'd be sending them to their deaths. And whoever was hunting them would probably come for him next anyway, just for being a witness to whatever this was. 3 days, Fletcher said finally. "Then you tell me everything, and I mean everything." The older woman nodded once. Relief flickering across her face so quickly he almost missed it. 3 days. Fletcher grabbed his rifle and moved to the fire pit, stirring the ashes back to life. His hands worked automatically while his mind churned. He'd wanted a simple escape from the territory. Instead, he'd bought himself a war he didn't understand with an enemy he hadn't met. As the flames caught and smoke rose into Morning sky, Fletcher couldn't shake one thought. $12 had never felt so expensive, and whoever was coming, they were already closer than any of them wanted to admit. They broke camp in silence. Fletcher watched how the women moved, efficient and practiced, like they'd been preparing for this moment their entire lives. The older one checked the tree line every few seconds. The younger one kept her hand near a knife tucked into her belt. Whatever was coming, they'd seen it before. Fletcher saddled the mare, his mind working through possibilities. None of them were good. He'd crossed paths with land grabbers, claim jumpers, men who saw the frontier as a place where laws dissolved into dust. But the fear in these women's eyes suggested something worse, something personal. "What do I call you?" Fletcher asked as he tightened the saddle straps. The older woman looked up from rolling their blankets. "Ayanna and her Kiona, my sister." Fletcher nodded. "I'm Fletcher, and I need to know what I'm protecting you from." Ayanna's jaw tightened. 3 days, that was agreement. Agreements changed. Fletcher met her eyes. "Someone's hunting you. I'm not riding blind into an ambush." Kiona whispered something to her sister in a language Fletcher didn't understand. Ayanna shook her head sharply, but Kiona pressed, her voice urgent. Finally, Ayanna turned back to Fletcher. "There is a man. He wants our father's land. Rich land. Water runs through it." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He believes if he takes us, our father will have no choice but to surrender everything." "Takes you?" Fletcher felt his stomach turn. "You mean yes." Ayanna's voice went flat. "He has done this before. 2 others. They did not survive to tell what happened." Fletcher's hands stilled on the saddle. The morning suddenly felt colder. "How many men does he have?" 6, maybe 7. Kiona spoke quietly. "They know these hills better than anyone." "Then why send you to me? I'm one man with a rifle and a horse I just bought." Ayanna stepped closer. And for the first time, Fletcher saw past her defensive walls, saw the exhaustion, the terror she was barely holding back. "Our father heard stories about you. 2 winters ago, the camp near Silver Ridge." Fletcher's blood went cold. "How does he know about that? Word travels even to our people." Ayanna held his gaze. "He heard that you stood between 12 miners and a family they wanted to burn out. Alone, outnumbered, you did not run. I got lucky," Fletcher said quietly, "and 3 of those miners are dead now. But the family lived." Ayanna's voice cracked slightly. "That is why he chose you, not because you are perfect. Because when it mattered, you did not walk away." Fletcher looked at the 2 women, at the small bundles of their lives, packed and ready to flee. At the way they kept glancing toward the distant ridgeline. He thought about the $12 in his pocket that now felt like blood money, about how a simple horse trade had turned into a gamble with lives he didn't know and deaths he might not prevent. "This man," Fletcher said slowly, "what's his name? Gideon Pratt." Ayanna spit the name like poison. "He owns half the territory." "Wants the other half." Fletcher had heard that name before, whispered in saloons, cursed by homesteaders who'd lost everything. "Pratt didn't just take land, he erased people." "Mound up," Fletcher said, his decision made. "We move fast and we don't stop until dark." As they rode out, Fletcher caught movement in the trees behind them. Just a shadow, just a flicker of something that shouldn't be there. He didn't mention it to the women, didn't need to. Ayanna had already seen it. Her hand moved to the knife at her belt, and her eyes met Fletcher's with a silent message. They were already being followed, and time had just run out. They rode hard through terrain that cut like broken glass. Fletcher kept them off the main trails, pushing through dense brush and rocky passages that would slow anyone following. But every time he checked behind them, he felt it, the pressure of pursuit, steady and patient. By midday, the mare was bared with sweat. Ayanna and Kiona shared the second horse Fletcher had managed to acquire from a homesteader. An hour into their ride, The old man had asked no questions when Fletcher offered him $3 and a warning to lock his doors for the next week. They stopped at a creek to water the horses. Fletcher scanned the ridge line while Ayanna filled their cantons. Kiona kept watch on the trail behind them, her posture rigid with tension. "How far to the pass?" Fletcher asked. 2 days if we keep this pace." Ayanna straightened, water dripping from her hands. "But they will try to cut us off before we reach it." "Why not after?" "Because after the pass we enter territory where Pratt has no power. The settlers there do not fear him. They have numbers, unity." She paused. "Everything our people lack." Fletcher heard the bitterness in her voice. "How long has he been threatening your father?" 6 months. He started with offers, then threats. Then he came with his men and took our neighbor's daughter." Ayanna's voice dropped. "They found her 3 weeks later. What was left of her?" Kiona made a sound like a wounded animal. Ayanna moved to her sister, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. They stood like that for a long moment, and Fletcher turned away to give them privacy for their grief. That's when he saw the rider, a single figure on the eastern ridge, too far for a clear shot, but close enough to send a message. The man sat motionless on his horse, watching them, making sure they knew they were seen. "We need to move," Fletcher said quietly. Ayanna followed his gaze and went pale. "That is Cormac Pratt's tracker. If he found us, the others are close." They mounted quickly. Fletcher's mind raced through options. They couldn't outrun 7 men, not with tired horses and rough terrain ahead. They couldn't fight, not 3 against 7 in open country. That left one choice: find a defensible position and hope Pratt's men weren't willing to die for their employer's land grab. 2 hours later, Fletcher found what he was looking for: a narrow canyon with steep walls and a single entrance. Dangerous if they got trapped, but it would force Pratt's men to come at them 1 or 2 at a time. They made camp in the canyon's back corner where the walls curved to create a natural shelter. Fletcher positioned the horses behind them and checked his rifle. 12 rounds, not enough if it came to a real fight. "Can you shoot?" he asked Ayanna. She reached into her bundle and pulled out a revolver. "Old but well maintained, our father taught us," he said. "The frontier respects only 2 things, strength and the willingness to use it." Fletcher nodded. "Good, because when they come, they'll try to talk first. Make it sound reasonable. That's when they're most dangerous." As darkness fell, Fletcher built a small fire not to cook, but to make their position obvious. If Pratt's men wanted them, let them come where Fletcher could see them, where he could control the approach. Kiona sat close to her sister, and for the first time since they'd met, Fletcher saw her crying silently. Ayanna held her hand, her own face carved from stone. "I am sorry," Ayanna said to Fletcher. "My father asked too much of a stranger." "He asked exactly right," Fletcher replied. "Man who'd turn away from this isn't worth the horse he sold me." The first shout came just before midnight. A voice from the canyon entrance, friendly and calm, like they were old acquaintances meeting on a Sunday afternoon. "Fletcher Knox, we know you're in there, and we know you don't want trouble." Fletcher gripped his rifle and waited. The voice continued, smooth as snake oil. "Pratt sent us to collect what's his. You hand over the women, we ride away peaceful. Nobody needs to die tonight." Fletcher looked at Ayanna and Kona, saw them staring back at him with identical expressions, waiting to see if he'd keep his word or prove their father's gamble had been a mistake. The voice called out again, "What's it going to be, Cowboy? 2 women you don't know or your life." Fletcher stood and stepped toward the firelight where they could see him clearly, and that's when everything went wrong. A gunshot cracked through the night air, not aimed at Fletcher, but at the canyon wall behind him. Rock shattered and rained down in fragments. A warning shot, a demonstration. Fletcher dropped behind cover as 3 more shots followed, each one closer. They weren't trying to kill him yet. They were showing him how exposed he was, how this could end badly for everyone. "Last chance, Knox," the voice echoed off the stone walls. "You're just a drifter who made a bad deal. Walk away and we'll pretend this never happened." Fletcher glanced back at Ayanna and Kiona. They'd pressed themselves against the rear wall, weapons drawn. Ayanna's face was set with determination, but her hands trembled slightly. Kiona looked younger than her years, eyes wide with fear. She was trying desperately to hide. "How many can you see?" Ayanna whispered. 4 at the entrance, maybe more in the shadows. Fletcher checked his rifle. "They're spreading out, trying to get angles on us." Another voice called out, rougher than the first. "We got all night, girls, and Pratt pays us whether you're breathing or not when we bring you in." Laughter followed, cruel and confident. The sound of men who'd done this before and never faced consequences. Fletcher's jaw tightened. He'd been in bad situations, but this was different. These weren't claim jumpers or drunk miners. These were professionals, men who hunted people for money and probably enjoyed it. There, Kona pointed toward the eastern wall. A shadow moved between rocks, trying to work around their position. Fletcher aimed and fired. The shadow yelped and scrambled back, but Fletcher knew he'd only grazed him. Still, it sent a message. The response was immediate. A barrage of gunfire lit up the canyon entrance. Fletcher pulled Ayanna and Kiona down as bullets ricocheted off stone. The horses screamed and stamped, panicked by the noise. When the shooting stopped, Fletcher's ears rang in the sudden silence. Then that first voice again, no longer friendly. "You just made this personal, Cowboy. Pratt wanted them alive, but he'll settle for a message. And we'll start by killing that horse you paid so much for." Fletcher's blood went cold. They'd been watching from the beginning, knew about the $12, knew about Dakota. This wasn't just about taking the women anymore. This was about teaching everyone in the territory what happened when you crossed Gideon Pratt. "What do we do?" Kiona asked, her voice barely audible. Fletcher looked at the narrow canyon behind them. He thought it was defensible, but now he saw it for what it really was, a trap. If Pratt's men were patient, they could starve them out or simply wait until dawn when shooting would be easier. "We can't stay here," Fletcher said quietly. "There's another way out. Has to be." Ayanna shook her head. "The walls are too steep. We would need." She stopped as Fletcher pointed upward. Where the moonlight caught the canyon's far wall, there was a crack in the stone. Not a path exactly, but maybe enough of a climb for desperate people. "You can't be serious," Ayanna breathed. "They'll expect us to stay put or try to break through the front. They won't expect us to go up." Fletcher met her eyes. "It's dangerous, maybe impossible, but it's the only chance we have." Another shout from the entrance. "We're coming in. You got 30 seconds to throw out those weapons and send the women forward." Fletcher started gathering their supplies. Moving quickly and quietly, the horses would have to stay. That thought burned, but there was no choice. He whispered instructions to Ayanna and Kiona, pointing out the route he'd spotted. "When I start shooting, you climb fast as you can. Don't look back." "What about you?" Ayanna gripped his arm. "I'll be right behind you, but someone needs to keep them focused on this position." Fletcher pulled free gently. "Trust me." He moved to the front of their shelter and positioned himself where he could see the entrance. Counted 4 shadows moving forward, weapons ready. They thought this was over. Thought Fletcher would surrender or die trying to defend a position that couldn't be defended. Fletcher took a breath, aimed at the nearest shadow, and fired. Then everything dissolved into chaos. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Fletcher moved between cover points, shooting and reloading. creating as much noise and confusion as possible. Behind him, he heard Ayanna and Kiona climbing, their movement masked by the firefight. A bullet caught Fletcher's shoulder, spinning him against the rock wall. Pain exploded through his arm, but he forced himself to keep shooting. Had to buy them more time. Had to make sure they reached the top before Pratt's men realized what was happening. Another minute, just one more minute, then he heard it. Ayanna's voice from above, urgent and strained. "Fletcher, now." He turned and ran for the wall and saw Cormarmac the tracker stepping out of the shadows directly between him and escape. Cormarmac was younger than Fletcher expected, maybe 30, with cold eyes and a knife already in his hand. He didn't say anything, just smiled like he'd been waiting for this moment all night. Fletcher's shoulder screamed where the bullet had torn through muscle. His rifle was empty. Cormarmac knew it. That's why he'd chosen the knife instead of his gun. This wasn't about efficiency. This was about sending a message written in pain. They circled each other. Behind Cormarmac, Fletcher could hear the other men realizing what was happening, shouting, running toward their position. He had seconds, not minutes. "They're going to catch you anyway," Cormarmac said casually. "Pratt always gets what he wants. Only question is how much you're going to hurt first." Fletcher didn't waste breath on words. He feinted left, then drove forward with everything he had. Cormarmac was fast, but Fletcher had desperation and rage fueling him. They crashed together, and Fletcher's momentum carried them both into the canyon wall. The knife flashed. Fletcher caught Cormarmac's wrist, but his wounded shoulder gave out at the worst moment. The blade sliced across his ribs, shallow but burning. Fletcher brought his knee up hard, heard Cormarmac grunt, then slammed the tracker's hand against the rock until the knife fell. They grappled in the dirt. Cormarmac was stronger, but Fletcher was fighting for something more than money. He got his good arm around Cormarmac's throat and squeezed. The tracker thrashed, clawing at Fletcher's face, but Fletcher held on. "Fletcher," Ayanna's voice cut through the struggle. She'd climbed back down, her revolver aimed at Cormac's head. "Let him go, we need to move." Fletcher released his grip. Cormarmac collapsed, gasping for air. Fletcher grabbed the fallen knife and stood, swaying. Blood soaked his shirt from both wounds. The world tilted dangerously, but he forced himself to focus. The other men were 50 feet away and closing fast. Fletcher and Ayanna ran for the wall. Kiona reached down, extending her hand. Fletcher pushed Ayanna up first, then used his good arm to start climbing. Every movement sent fire through his shoulder and ribs. The stone cut his hands, his boots slipped on loose rock. Gunfire erupted below. Bullets sparked off the canyon wall inches from Fletcher's head. He climbed faster, driven by adrenaline and terror. Ayanna and Kiona pulled him over the edge just as a bullet tore through the space where his leg had been. They collapsed on the flat ground above the canyon, panting, Fletcher's vision blurred. He could feel blood running down his side, soaking into the dirt beneath him. "We have to keep moving," Kiona said urgently. "They will find another way up. Give him a minute," Ayanna snapped. She tore fabric from her dress and pressed it against Fletcher's shoulder. The pressure made him gasp. "You are losing too much blood." "Don't have a minute." Fletcher forced himself to sit up. The world spun, but he gritted his teeth and stood. How far to the pass? 10 mi, maybe less. Ayanna wrapped the makeshift bandage tight. "But you cannot make it like this. Watch me." They moved through the darkness, Fletcher between the two women. Ayanna kept one hand on his good arm, steadying him when he stumbled. The terrain was rough, all rocks and hidden holes waiting to break an ankle. Behind them, Fletcher heard shouting. Pratt's men had found the climbing route. The pursuit was continuing, but they'd bought time, maybe enough. Dawn broke slowly, painting the sky in shades of blood. Fletcher's legs felt like they were made of wet rope. Each breath came harder than the last, but ahead through his fading vision he could see The pass, the border between Pratt's territory and freedom. Almost there, Kiona whispered. That's when they heard the horses not behind them. Ahead, Fletcher's heart sank as riders emerged from the pass. 5 of them spread in a line that blocked the only way forward. In the center, on a black stallion, sat a man in expensive clothes that seemed absurd in the wilderness. His face was weathered but handsome, his smile the kind that rich men wore when they knew they'd won. Gideon Pratt had been waiting for them all along. Well, Pratt called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. The $12 cowboy, I've been eager to meet you. He gestured to the pass behind him. I'm afraid this road is closed, and you've got nowhere left to run. Fletcher's hand moved to his empty rifle, then to his belt, where Cormac's knife still hung. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. They were trapped between 2 groups of armed men with nowhere to hide and no strength left to fight. Ayanna moved closer to Fletcher, her voice breaking. I am sorry. We should have told you everything from the beginning. Fletcher looked at her, then at Kiona, then at Pratt, sitting there with his victory smile. The sun climbed higher, exposing them completely. No cover, no options, no way out. Tell me now, Fletcher said quietly. What didn't you tell me? Ayanna met his eyes, and Fletcher saw something there that made his blood run colder than any of Pratt's threats. Our father, she whispered, he did not send us to you just for protection. Pratt's laughter rolled across the open ground, and Fletcher realized with sickening certainty that he'd been playing a game where he never knew the real rules. Fletcher kept his eyes on Pratt while Ayanna spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. The horse was never the real deal. It was a test to see if you would honor an agreement, even when it cost you everything. Why? Fletcher's voice was from pain and exhaustion. Because Pratt killed our mother 5 years ago in front of witnesses, but no one would testify. They were too afraid. Ayanna's hands trembled. Our father needed someone who could not be bought or frightened. Someone who would stand when others ran. Pratt dismounted slowly, deliberately. He walked toward them with the confidence of a man who owned everything he could see. Your father was always clever. Takakota sending his daughters with a stranger hoping to find some frontier hero. He laughed, but heroes die easy out here. Knocks, especially ones bleeding from 2 bullet wounds. Fletcher's grip tightened on the knife. His vision swam, but he forced himself to stay upright. Behind them, Cormac and the others emerged from the rocks, weapons drawn. They were completely surrounded. Now, here's what's going to happen. Pratt continued, you're going to step aside. The women come with me, and maybe I let you crawl away to die somewhere quiet. And if I don't, Pratt's smile widened. Then I kill all 3 of you right here and tell everyone you died trying to kidnap Takakota's daughters. Who's going to argue? A dead drifter and 2 women from a tribe nobody cares about. Fletcher felt Kiona press something into his hand, a folded piece of paper. He glanced down just long enough to see writing names. Dates, locations. Our father knew Pratt would try this, Kiona whispered. He spent 2 years gathering proof, every crime, every death, every piece of land stolen. That paper names witnesses willing to testify if someone can guarantee their safety. Fletcher understood then the entire arrangement, the horse, the women, the $12 that bought not just transportation but responsibility. Takakota had sent his daughters with the only thing that could destroy Pratt, evidence, and he'd bet everything on Fletcher being the kind of man who would protect it. You look confused, Knox. Pratt took another step closer. Let me make this simple. Drop the knife. Walk away or I kill you and take what I want anyway. Fletcher looked at Ayanna. Her eyes were red from crying, but her jaw was set with determination. She'd known what her father was asking, had known the risks, still came anyway because the alternative was watching Pratt take everything from everyone who couldn't fight back. $12, Fletcher said suddenly. That's what your father had left, wasn't it? Ayanna nodded. Everything else went to hiding the evidence, to paying people to write down what they saw. He gave you all he had and hoped it was enough. Fletcher laughed, though it sent pain shooting through his ribs. Man sells me his best horse, sends me his daughters, and gives me the tools to destroy his enemy. All for $12, he met Pratt's eyes. That's not a deal, that's a declaration of war. Pratt's smile faded. Last chance, cowboy. Fletcher straightened despite the agony. The knife felt solid in his hand. Paper burned like fire in his pocket. You know what I realized? You're not afraid of me killing you. You're afraid of what's written on this paper. That paper means nothing without witnesses who will talk, maybe. Fletcher took a step forward. But you rode all the way out here to stop it from reaching anyone who matters. That tells me it means something. Pratt's hand moved toward his gun. His men raised their weapons. Fletcher felt Ayanna and Kiona moved closer, their bodies tense and ready. $12, Fletcher said quietly. Takakota paid $12 for me to make a choice, stand or run, fight or surrender. He met Pratt's eyes. I'm choosing to make you regret you didn't kill me in that canyon when you had the chance. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the ground. 8 men with guns against 1 wounded cowboy and 2 women. The odds were impossible. The outcome seemed certain, but Fletcher saw something flicker in Pratt's eyes, something that looked like doubt, because men like Pratt understood money and fear and power. They didn't understand someone willing to die for $12 and a promise to a stranger. Kill them, Pratt ordered, and Fletcher moved not toward Pratt. Toward the pass, toward the one place Pratt couldn't follow without risking everything he'd built. Run, Fletcher shouted to Ayanna and Kiona. Get across the border. Gunfire erupted. Fletcher felt another bullet tear into him, this time through his leg. He stumbled but kept moving. Ayanna caught him, her arm around his waist, half carrying him. Kiona ran ahead, screaming for help toward the settlement on the other side of the pass. 50 yards, 40, 30. Fletcher's leg gave out. He crashed to the ground, pulling Ayanna down with him. Pratt's men closed in, their footsteps pounding. Then Fletcher heard something beautiful, voices, many voices, people emerging from the pass, settlers, homesteaders, men and women with rifles and determination. And at the front, an old man Fletcher, recognized from years ago, one of the families he defended at Silver Ridge. That's far enough, Pratt, the old man shouted. This is free territory, and you're not welcome here. Pratt froze. His men looked between him and the growing line of armed settlers. Fletcher counted at least 20 people, maybe more emerging from the past. Not professional fighters, but homesteaders who'd lost family and land to men like Pratt. They had numbers, and they had fury. This doesn't concern you, Samuel, Pratt called to the old man. His voice stayed calm, but Fletcher saw tension in his shoulders. Just collecting what's mine. Those women aren't yours, Samuel replied. And Knox there saved my daughter's life once. I don't forget debts. He raised his rifle slightly, none of us do. Pratt's men shifted nervously. They were killers, but they weren't stupid. 8 against 20 were bad odds. Against 20 angry settlers who knew the terrain and had nothing left to lose, that was suicide. Fletcher felt Ayanna pressing cloth against his leg wound. The pain was overwhelming, but he forced himself to focus. This was the moment, the turning point, but it wasn't over yet. You think they'll protect you forever? Pratt's mask slipped, showing the rage beneath. I own half this territory. I have connections, money, power. You're just a cowboy who made a bad deal. No. Fletcher struggled to his knees. Then to his feet. Ayanna supported him, her arms strong around his waist. I made exactly the deal Takakota intended. He paid $12 for someone who couldn't be bought, who'd carry evidence to people who'd use it, who'd stand between his daughters and men like you. Fletcher pulled out the folded paper, holding it high where everyone could see. This lists every land theft, every murder, every witness you thought was too scared to talk. He looked at Samuel. They were scared until now. Samuel stepped forward, hand extended. Give it here, Knox. We've been waiting for proof like this for 5 years. Pratt's hand moved toward his gun. You deliver that paper and you're a dead man, Cowboy, maybe. Fletcher's voice was steady despite the pain. But you shoot me in front of 20 witnesses and that paper still gets delivered. You let me deliver it and maybe you get to run before the law catches up. He smiled without humor. Either way, you lose. The standoff stretched. Pratt's men looked at their employer, waiting for orders. The settlers held their ground. Fletcher swayed on his ruined leg, but Ayanna kept him upright. Why? Pratt finally asked, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely confused. Why risk everything for people you don't even know? For $12 and a horse. Fletcher thought about that question, about the years he'd spent drifting, avoiding connections, running from the responsibility of caring whether anyone lived or died, about how that horse trade had offered him exactly what he'd wanted, a way out, a way to keep running. Because Takakota trusted me, Fletcher said quietly, and because these women deserved better than being someone's property, and because every time men like you win, it gets easier for the next one. He met Pratt's eyes. Someone has to stop running eventually. Kiona spoke then, her voice carrying across the tense silence. My mother's name was Dean Hoey. She was 32 when Pratt's men burned our home because my father refused to sell his land. She died protecting me. I was 17. Her voice broke for 5 years. We waited, scared, knowing he would come back. My father used everything we had to find proof to find someone brave enough to use it. She looked at Fletcher with tears streaming down her face. $12 was all he had left after paying for the evidence, but it was enough to buy a horse, and hoped that the man who needed that horse would be the one we'd been waiting for. The morning light caught the tears on Kiona's cheeks, caught the determination in Ayanna's eyes, caught the blood staining Fletcher's clothes and the paper trembling in his hand. Samuel moved forward slowly, carefully, and took the paper from Fletcher. He unfolded it and read, his weathered face hardening with each line. When he looked up, his eyes were cold. Ella Briggs, Thomas Callahan, Sarah Voss, Rebecca Flynn. He read the names like a prayer for the dead. All of them testified to me before they died. All of them said, if anyone came asking, tell the truth about Pratt. He looked at the other settlers. We all know these names. We all lost someone to this man. Pratt's hand was on his gun now, but he didn't draw, couldn't. Too many eyes watching. Too many rifles pointed his direction. Walk away, Pratt, Samuel said. While you still can, because tomorrow this evidence goes to the territorial marshal. And every person here will testify to what you just tried to do. For a long moment, Pratt didn't move. Then he looked at Fletcher with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yes, Fletcher said, it is. Pratt mounted his horse. His men did the same, moving slowly. Weapons still ready, they backed away from the pass, from the settlers, from Fletcher and the women who cost Pratt everything he'd built through fear. When they were finally gone, Fletcher's legs gave out completely. He collapsed into Ayanna's arms, consciousness fading. The last thing he heard was her voice, soft and breaking. You did it. You honored the deal. Fletcher wanted to tell her that the deal had never been about $12. That somewhere between the canyon and the pass, between the bullets and the blood, it had become about something else entirely. But darkness took him before he could find the words. Fletcher woke 3 days later in a homesteader's cabin with Ayanna sitting beside his bed. The wounds had been cleaned and stitched, his shoulder etched, his ribs burned, but he was alive. Through the window, he could see Kiona talking with Samuel's daughter near a well. Pratt. Fletcher's voice came out rough, gone. Ayanna's hand found his. The territorial marshal came yesterday. Samuel gave him the evidence. They found 3 more witnesses willing to testify now that Pratt ran. She paused. There is a warrant for murder, land theft, conspiracy. He will spend his life running or hanging. Fletcher closed his eyes, relief washing over him. Your father arriving tomorrow. Samuel sent word 3 days ago. Ayanna's voice broke slightly. He thought he was sending us to our deaths. that the $12 would buy us a quick end instead of what Pratt planned, but he sent the evidence anyway. He had no choice. If we stayed, Pratt would take everything. If we ran without proof, he would hunt us forever. She squeezed Fletcher's hand. You were the last hope. A stranger he heard about who might be fool enough or brave enough to stand. Fletcher laughed weakly. Not sure which I am. Both. I think. Ayanna smiled, and Fletcher saw something in her eyes that made his heart beat faster. Not just gratitude, something deeper that had grown through gunfire and blood and impossible choices. Over the next week, Fletcher healed slowly. Takakota arrived with tears streaming down his weathered face, embracing his daughters like he'd expected never to see them again. He tried to thank Fletcher with words that couldn't capture what the $12 had truly bought. You gave me my last hope, Takakota said quietly. Everything I had, everything I was, I put it in the hands of a stranger and prayed you were the man I needed you to be. I almost wasn't, Fletcher admitted. Almost walked away a dozen times, but you did not. Dakota placed a hand on Fletcher's shoulder. That is what matters. The territorial marshal came again 2 weeks later with news. Pratt had been found trying to cross into Mexico. There had been resistance, a brief gunfight. Gideon Pratt was dead, killed by men he'd hired and who turned on him when they realized his money was worthless against a rope. Justice, Fletcher thought. Rough and final. Samuel offered Fletcher work. Good pay, steady. But Fletcher looked at Ayanna when the offer came, saw the question in her eyes that matched the one in his chest. I might stay a while, Fletcher said, if that's acceptable. Ayanna's smile was answer enough. Months passed. Fletcher helped rebuild what Pratt had destroyed. Worked alongside Takakota's people and the settlers, building something that resembled community. The wounds healed, leaving scars that reminded him of the night he'd chosen to stand instead of run. One evening, Fletcher sat with Ayanna, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. The mare he'd bought for $12 grazed nearby, strong and healthy. Everything Takakota had promised. Do you ever regret it? Ayanna asked. The deal. Fletcher thought about that question, about how he'd wanted a simple escape and got a war instead. About how $12 had bought him bullet wounds and nightmares and the responsibility of other people's lives. About how those same $12 had given him something he hadn't known he needed. Purpose, connection, a place where running away wasn't the only option anymore. $12, Fletcher said quietly. Your father bought the most expensive horse in the territory because what came with it wasn't his daughters needing rescue. He looked at Ayanna, saw the understanding in her eyes. It was me needing to be found. Ayanna leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. Behind them, Kiona laughed at something Takakota said. Smoke rose from the settlement's chimneys. Life continued, built on the foundation of a desperate gamble and a stranger's choice. Fletcher had spent years believing he was worth exactly what he could carry. No more, no less. Takakota had seen something different. Had looked at a drifter and bet everything on the possibility that underneath the running in fear, there was someone worth $12 in a prayer. Turned out both of them had been right. The deal was complete. The debt was paid. And Fletcher Knox finally understood that sometimes the price of a horse is just $12. But the cost of becoming the person you were meant to be, that's measured in something far more valuable than money. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another tale of courage and impossible choices where honor is tested and lives hang in the balance. Don't forget to subscribe and consider leaving a super chat to help us keep bringing you stories like these. Your support means the world.